What if I told you that in preserving your legacy, you may actually be doing the very thing that is destroying it? Well, welcome to Fearless Family Business, folks. My name is Adam Hill, and I'm glad you're here. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject that is near and dear to all of us who are building multi-generational family businesses that want to survive and thrive into generations. Strengthen the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle in your family business. This is Fearless Family Business. We're unpacking a myth that's really keeping many family businesses stuck and some on the verge of collapse. And I want to explore what to do instead of thinking about legacy in terms of preservation, because that's traditionally how we've thought about it. And this whole idea stems from a keynote that I just gave recently, and one that I've been preparing for a long time. I've been researching and working on for quite a while because it is near and dear to me. It's on the topic of legacy. And the keynote was titled, Legacy is not about what you leave. It's about who you launch. And that's an important kind of teaser for what this episode is going to be about. Because we have traditionally, throughout our history of family business, especially within the last century or so, since this work really began, and family businesses have existed for centuries. I mean, if not thousands of years, families have worked together in trades. This is one of the oldest types of family dynamics that has ever existed. Families have worked together since they've been in tribes, since we've lived in tribal cultures. So family business is not anything new. But the actual study of multi-generational success in family business and how to help them to survive and thrive and the dynamics therein has really only existed for less than a century. So it's all very new science and everything like that. But I'm bringing my perspective from this unique standpoint of having run a fourth generation family business for many years and having grown up in that family business that was 4 generations old, 100 years old, started by my great grandfather. And from that perspective, I've seen a lot of things that could be made better. From the studies and the research that has been done out there in the world by different family business research centers, we see what we might be doing wrong. And we're getting a lot more data points on that, especially with regard to how we think about legacy. Now, traditionally, if you think about legacy, what do you think about? Well, if you're like many others who, and if you're like other families and family businesses, you might be thinking about what you want to leave behind, what you want to leave for your kids, what you want to leave for the next generation, or what you want to preserve that you've built. Maybe you're a first generation leader who has built something incredible, and you want that thing to be preserved. You want the next generation to take that and preserve it for you, to make sure that it lasts forever. But the problem is that in thinking about it in terms of preservation, we may be thinking that we're preserving something that should be lasting for generations. But what we're really doing is we may be dooming the future generations to failure, because we're trying to preserve something that may not be relevant in the future. And so legacy planning today, I think, is overly focused. And let's just face it, this is really where the money is. The money is in the legacy planning, in the estate planning, in preservation, because families build wealth. Families build assets. They acquire assets, and they acquire things. And they want to keep those things in the family, and they want to preserve that wealth, understandably, right? And there's organizations, there's legal entities out there, there's attorneys, there's financial planners, all sorts of planners out there that know this and will charge exorbitant fees to help you to preserve that into the next generation. The only problem is that in helping you preserve those things, they're not going to be there, or you're not going to be there to make sure that happens okay. And also, they're going to be long gone by the time that maybe 3 generations from now, which is about when this will happen, that wealth runs out because you focused solely on preservation and you haven't focused on preparation. Preservation is where, the money is. And so that whole idea is kind of central to this theme and I want to be clear on this. I am not a financial advisor. I am not I am not an attorney. So I'm not offering any legal advice, no financial advice here. For the financial purposes, I'm going to say that preparing or setting up the trusts or estate plans or making sure that all of the legal documents are in order within your estate is vitally important. And I want to be clear about that. And I want to be clear that I'm not offering advice on that front. But what I am saying is that we're overly focused on preserving the legacy, preserving the wealth, preserving the business, preserving the assets, preserving the founder's vision. And we're doing that while neglecting preparing the next generation to do what they need to do to survive and thrive. That's what this episode is about. Preservation is not the same as preparation. And you cannot preserve your way to multi-generational success. You just can't do it. So this whole idea that legacy planning today is overly focused on preservation and the founder's vision, preserving the wealth, preserving the business, preserving the founder's vision, that can become a trap. And I want to refer to that as the legacy trap. How many of you have felt like you might be in that legacy trap before, where you exist to preserve what has been created? That happened within our own family business. So my great-grandfather started our company back in 1923. And he started it with a grand vision to create a legacy, to create a business that could survive for generations, for many, so that his family in the future could have a sustainable business that would support them for generations. And he did everything that he could to build up this business. And then when it was time, he brought in his 4 sons into the business. And those 4 sons kind of reluctantly came into the business, but ended up working in that business for many decades. And then when it was time, they brought their kids in, the 3rd generation, and then the 4th. And then that was when I came in. And throughout the time that I was growing up in this business, from the time that I was a little kid going to company picnics and seeing my dad go to work or seeing how the business was operating just on the periphery, I developed a lot of pride and there was just a lot of weight around the idea of this legacy that it became almost otherworldly. It became so big that it in and of itself, this business, this legacy business almost became a sacred cow that could never, ever be changed. And that's the way legacy looked for us. Legacy for our company by the 3rd generation was all about preserving what was. And that idea of preserving what was great up until then, because it helped to define a culture for us. And our culture became around this idea that we've been a long-term family company where everybody was family and everybody and we were all going to survive and thrive together. And we were just this exceptional entity. Other family businesses would have dreamed of getting to the 4th generation like we did. And I was incredibly proud of it and excited to come work for that business when I came of age and when it came time for me to come and join the family business. But what we didn't realize was that there was a lot of dysfunction that was existing underneath the surface that just wasn't being addressed because of those sacred cows. And because there was no emphasis on creating new value, it was simply preserving what was. And so this preservation mindset meant an overemphasis on risk aversion. And risk aversion, there's risk tolerances that vary from one end of the scale to another. But in business, you're not going to survive or thrive unless you have some sort of tolerance for some level of risk. It could be calculated risk, but there has to be a system or a structure around taking risks appropriately so that you can grow. And we just didn't have that anymore. We were trying to preserve what was. And so by the time that I became the president of the company, we were already kind of neck deep in the crisis mode. We'd plateaued, we'd peaked, and we were already on the decline. And I noticed that within our first year, we were into the red on profitability. And by our second year, we were nearly insolvent, on the verge of bankruptcy. And that's when I knew that something had to change, because all of the weight of that legacy was falling on myself and the leadership team. And it depended on us to break these sacred cows that had been inherent in our business for so long, that I'd grown up in, knowing that we couldn't change. We had to be the ones to shift our focus onto something new, something different, something other than preservation. And that was a hard shift. It was a hard psychological shift to make, because we'd always been entrapped in that. We had been trapped in that legacy trap. So ask again, how have you ever been in that legacy trap? The statistics say that we weren't alone in that in falling into that trap. In fact, we were actually beating the odds by making it to the fourth generation and still being a very viable business entity. The key stats, we've read these, and these stats have existed in family business for generations. In fact, there's actually a term for it, and it spans many generations, many centuries old, many cultures, and it's called the 3 generations curse. Shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. What was built in the first generation is usually gone by the end of the third, or by the 3rd generation. And that's not a new concept. It's very common. In fact, 70% of family businesses fail to transition to generation 2. 70%. 90% don't make it to generation 3. And then the statistics only get worse from there. And we were actually able to make it into the 4th generation. Now, wealth transfer, like the transfer of family wealth, actually kind of mirrors those statistics. We look at 70% of wealth is not able to be transferred into the 2nd generation, or that means basically that 7 out of 10 value creators in generation 1, so people who are entrepreneurs that are creating really great things, 7 out of 10 of them are not able, that wealth is gone by generation 2. 90% of it by generation 3. So just imagine building something great and it being gone 2 generations from now, 3 generations from now. We are not doing our kids any form of service by pinning a burden on them to preserve what we've built. That's the disservice that we give them. If we are trying to get our kids to preserve what we've built, we are doing them a disservice. I can't say that enough. Because what we're doing is we're passing on mythology, not a blueprint. So what's the blueprint? Well, the blueprint is instead of in addition to, again, because it's important to set up the estate plan, the trusts, all that great stuff. But putting that aside for a moment, that's not the primary emphasis on legacy. Legacy is not about preservation. It is about preparation. And so our primary focus should be, let the attorneys, let the estate planners, let them handle the documentation about that. But also, and most importantly, start talking to your kids about what they can expect. Start looping them in instead of leaving them out of the conversations around legacy. Start telling them that. And also start preparing them for to not just preserve what you've created. That's not what should be done. We should be preparing our kids to create value in the world. And that's where our company, the company I was running, had failed. Was we stopped creating new value. If you're a family business owner or operator and you're looking to get more control over your business, I would love to talk with you. I want to give you a special invite to request a free 90-minute workshop with me to learn the powerful tools of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Just shoot me an email at adam.hill@eosworldwide.com. Again, that email is adam.hill@eosworldwide.com. I'll put that in the show notes as well, and I look forward to talking to you soon. When we think of legacy, we tend to think of legacy, the foundation of legacy, in terms of preserving what was. We think that that's a foundational piece of legacy, but that's not true. Do you know what the real foundation of legacy is? The real foundation of legacy is value creation. If you're not creating value, you are not creating a legacy. And once you stop creating value, well, then you stop. Your legacy is doomed to decline. That's the real truth. You need to keep creating value, which means that we need to create value creators. That's the most important thing that we could do for our legacy. Even if the kids decide on their own that that the value that they want to create in the world is not in the business that you're running, the most important thing that they could do, then what they'll be prepared to do is create value in a new area, in an area that they're passionate by. So I like to think of it as really two specific circles. We have, if you think of two overlapping circles, each of these are a legacy, right? And each legacy represents an individual legacy. We tend to think of legacy as like a singular thing, like we have a legacy and I'm going to pass my legacy on to the kids, then they will live it. It's not a singular circle that we pass on through generations. What it really is it's an individual circle that represents us, I have a circle that represents me and the legacy that I'm creating. My kids have a legacy that represents each of them and their individual legacy. And your parents have their individual legacy. Your siblings have their own individual legacy. And those individual legacy circles, they overlap, like create this just massive matrix of Venn diagrams that exist of individual legacies. And those individual legacies encompass our values, our passions, what we want to pursue, our knowledge, our capabilities, everything like that. It actually encompasses three important things. It encompasses what I would call freedom, which is our freedom to pursue whatever we want, our freedom to exist freely and do what we want. Capability, which is the capability to stand on our own 2 feet, to be self-sustainable adults and to add value to the world. And then really so freedom and capability. And then the final piece is purpose. And when you are able to live freely and find your capability, you can actually find your purpose as well. Joseph Campbell talks a lot about the hero's journey. And I think this hero's journey is an important aspect of these individual legacies that we each live. And you'll notice that in any hero's journey, the very first step in that hero's journey is what? Well, the hero has to leave home. They have to leave the protection of the parents. They're experiencing their own freedom for the first time. Then they go out into the world and they experience some level of hardship or some trial, and they meet a mentor or they meet a community that somehow helps them to navigate this trial. They fall down, they get beat up, they get challenged, and then they get back up again, and they get beat up again, and they get challenged, and they keep falling down and getting up, and falling down and getting up, and falling down and getting up. And that is the development of capability, because, my friends, we cannot develop capability in a container. We can only develop capability in a crucible. We can only develop that capability through trial, through challenge, through difficulty. And that's the hard part we have as parents, is we don't want to let our kids suffer. We don't want to let our kids go through pain, but we have to if we want them to become capable adults. And so those two phases of the hero's journey, that first freedom from the home, going out into the world, and then finding those trials and those challenges and getting beat down and getting back up again, meeting the mentor, meeting the community. And then finally they experience that triumph where they get up and they finally win. And that's where the hero is born. And that's where they find the purpose. And that purpose, then they live into it really. through that trial, through that error, once they have the freedom and the capability, finding that purpose, they can do one of two things. Now they're truly value creators in this world. And the first thing that they can do is they can go back home and they can bring that value back to their home and give that value there. That would be like coming back to the family business and helping it to succeed into the next generation. Or the other thing that they can do is they can bring that value into the world in a new way. Maybe they become a hero of a new community or in some other way, but they're bringing value into the world. And that's the individual legacy that we're living. We're all living our hero's journey. And that hero's journey is the legacy that we're creating. Legacy is not about the past. Legacy is not about preserving something that was. Legacy lives right now in the present. We are living our legacy right now. And that's the important thing, is we're building a legacy not to pass on, but so that we can live it right now. And we can make an impact right now as we exist in this world. We're making the difference. We're living with meaning. And that's what that individual legacy is. And when those individual legacies overlap, it creates what's called a collective legacy. And in that collective is where we're living this legacy together, where you as the mentors or the parents or the current generation of leadership that's preparing the next generation of leadership, that's where that preparation comes into play. That's where we create the structure and the stewardship in order to make that legacy last. And in that collective legacy, we can provide that structure a lot of times through something like an EOS, something like an entrepreneurial operating system or some kind of system that you can use to transfer information through legacy planning, through preparation, but making sure that we're communicating effectively to the next generation what they can expect, what they can build, giving them that capacity to build the capability, giving them that freedom, that autonomy to build that capability within the boundaries that they can help them to succeed. And that's really how legacies can be created. And that's really how when I was running our company, and when we started to turn the company around, that's how we found, that's how we discovered to live the legacy together. And it was really when we started implementing EOS in our business and we started professionalizing our business, we started communicating more. We started going deeper into conflict, into healthy conflict. And we started to avoid the artificial harmony. And we just frankly started to prepare the next generation more. We started focusing again on the value, on creating new value. Remember, folks, the foundation of value is not in or the foundation of legacy is not in preserving what was. The foundation of legacy is in creating value and always creating value. Programs like EOS can help with that. It helped us, and that's what helped Hill Brothers, our company, to turn around. It's what helped us to get back on the path of profitability, to align around a big vision for what we wanted to create in the world. And create and live with a combined set of values and really succeed in building a sustainable foundation for the next generation. So the key takeaway here is that legacy is not about preserving what was. It's about preparing and launching the next generation. It's about understanding that legacy exists in the present, that we are all living our own right now. And the way that we're living it now is meaningful. And we can't expect to pass on that legacy to our kids without first preparing them to create new value in the world, to create what they want to create. And that's how we will, and that's how we can make this, and that's how we can make family business more sustainable, more prepared. And that's how we can avoid this trap of the 3-generation curse. Remember, legacy, preparing your legacy, is more than just an estate plan. It's more than just the trusts you're going to put on paper. That's not finishing the work. The real legacy is about them and the next generation. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you get a lot from it. And I hope you're able to think about legacy in a whole new way. The statistics don't lie. Most family businesses won't survive into the second generation, and very few survive into future generations. And it's important that we don't overlook these statistics, or we don't try to look at them as things that we can beat. But we can transcend those statistics by changing the way we look at legacy. We can better prepare our kids to be self-sustainable, to live into their own individual legacies, to live into their freedom, their capability, and their purpose so that they can create value in the world. And the real legacy that we can leave in this world is a legacy of value creators who are purpose-driven and are driven by what lights them up, whether it be the businesses that we're running now or whatever value they can create in the future. That's how we create legacy. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.